Welcome to Snap and Maps webinar. It's a pleasure having you all join us. I'm joined today by a few presenters. The first is Hyunjun Kim, who is a evaluation specialist from the University of Minnesota Extension. We also have Chantal Rose, who is also an evaluation specialist from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And they'll be delivering the first portion of the presentation today. And the second portion will be delivered by the PANEN intern, Frances Schulenberg, who is a Temple undergraduate student who's been spending her time with PANEN on a mapping project. So this is the perfect marriage between some of the folks maybe with a little bit more experience in SNAP-Ed evaluation and someone who's just kind of coming into it and has learned a lot in the process. So thank you all for being here, and I turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. We are happy to be here. You'll notice we did have another team member, Sue Singh, who helped us put this presentation together. She's unable to be here today, but we want to thank her and her contributions, as well as our GIS mapping committee that has helped us do a lot of this work. So getting started, understanding SNAP-Ed, GIS maps, and dashboards. Next slide. We would be remiss to not make the following land acknowledgement. America is a country founded on the genocide of one people and the enslavement of another, and this is a current reality that our country is still working to reconcile. And so as we discuss the utilization of geographical maps, we do want to recognize and honor Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of these lands. And as we go about our work, whether it's public health or SNAP-Ed, we really hope that all individuals and agencies can move beyond more superficial statements and really commit to addressing these settler colonial legacies of violence and really prioritize the redistribution of material resources, power, and equitable support for these peoples and nations. Next slide, please. Okay, so we want to make sure that we start with a, we were going to do this, but we are guessing that we do have a wide range of individuals who have familiarity or not with GIS mapping, but we're hoping to at least get everybody on a similar page as we go through this. Next slide. Okay, so common language. Let's start with some definitions so that we have some working vernacular to use together today. Next slide, please. All right, so to define static maps and infographics, this is a really common tool and way to visualize data. Static maps and infographics are standalone maps. They cannot be modified or manipulated once they're produced. They're usually distributed as PDFs or JPEGs or PNGs. They're usually created for a singular purpose to communicate a limited set of data to a specific audience. And so since this information doesn't change, you can't really vary the information that you look at. You can't zoom in or out or anything like that, but it's a great way to have a snapshot of data at a certain period of time. Next slide, please. The next level of map that we want to talk about are interactive maps. So as you can see here in this example, think Google or Apple Maps. These types of interactive maps are maps that can be manipulated a little bit and interacted with. So hopefully many of you have been able to use these, but you can type in your destination, you can select your pathways, you can zoom in and out. You can also click on other areas on the map to tell you information like hotels, phone numbers, addresses, and things like that. So it's a little bit more interactive than a static map and uses geographic information to display that. Next slide, please. We talk about dashboards a lot. It kind of was a buzzword starting several years ago. And dashboards can look a variety of ways, but typically it's a way to aggregate a variety of types of data into a singular place. It typically requires a specialized software like Tableau or Power BI. And each of these dashboards have varying degrees of interactivity, and they also have varying purposes as well. But as you can see in this example, typically there's an area where you can make some selections to drill down to certain data. You can also click around, on some of the geographic maps, and the data that is displayed will change based on what you select. And so it's got some really good versatility in terms of interactivity. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, and then finally we get to GIS maps. So GIS stands for Geographic Information System. It is a computer-based tool for capturing, storing, visualizing, and displaying spatial geographic data. Essentially, GIS maps connect data to maps. They're visual representations of quantifiable information, and they're highly dynamic and highly interactive. As a user, you can interact with the map by selecting a variety of filters. You can add or subtract filters. You can zoom in and out. You can drill down to single data points. You can highlight certain features. And so it's a great way to really have a comprehensive look at place-based information. It allows users to stack a variety of different information, which gives you more insightful, more nuanced, relevant, and really precise data to work from. Next slide, please. This is one example of a GIS map. This was created by the Michigan Fitness Foundation, and it allows users to efficiently find and visualize information about food, nutrition, and physical activity resources in their communities. And this is something that you can see on the right-hand side, that there are a variety of indicators and fields that you can select on to drill down to more detailed localized information. Next slide, please. Additionally, Hyunjin Kim and our team were able to collect a lot of examples of SNAP-Ed agencies across the nation that utilize GIS maps. And so Hyunjin was able to create an ASNA map of maps. You can see a QR code there. So for those of you who are interested, you're able to go and check out that map and have a singular place where you can find a variety of wonderful GIS map examples. Next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. This is Hyunjin Kim, and we, the ASNA GIS committee. ASNA is an association for SNAP-Ed, SNAP Nutrition Education administrators, and many of national SNAP-Ed administrators who are interested in GIS maps. We formed a small team and keep conversation around how SNAP-Ed can utilize GIS maps better for to make our communities better. So this group had a national survey, and we collected all the data, and then we created the ASNA map of maps. And based on that data, I'm going to show you how SNAP-Ed agencies are using GIS maps from a variety of examples. So we can use GIS maps for multiple different purposes in SNAP-Ed programming. We can create community asset maps. We can use maps for community needs assessment. We can use maps to monitor our work and use maps to communicate with external stakeholders. Let's move to the community asset map. It's another example. This East Hartford, Connecticut maps shows the farmers markets, food share mobiles, grocery stores, and food pantries in different icons. Then shows the bus routes to get to those food resources. This will allow community members who do not have vehicles to find food more easily. Those food resources and transportation system are important community assets for SNAP-Ed communities. Another example for community asset mapping is developed by Illinois SNAP-Ed. Similar to Connecticut Map, it shows food resources in the community, including school and summer meal sites, farmers market, food pantries, SNAP-Ed week offices, grocery stores, and senior food resources. They even expanded it to a national map. So you can enter foodfinder.us in the web browser, then you can search your own community's resources outside of Illinois. So if you can try, it'll be a good tour to this map. And another important community asset is physical activity resources. There are a few examples of physical activity maps in SNAP-Ed. As we know, this Michigan map shows the locations of state parks using tree icons, mostly outside of the metro area. You can see those physical activity resources. And in many cases, SNAP-Ed agencies use GIS maps for community needs assessment to understand our community better. The most frequently used layer for community needs assessment was SNAP-Ed eligibility map. This map, Michigan map, shows the eligible census tracts in a city using blue colored areas. So when you see those blue dots, they are the program sites, and the blue areas, these are the eligible census tracts. They're matching pretty well. And this slide shows the Nevada dashboard, which integrated GIS maps and a dashboard. When you select a county and select a food insecurity layer, then it gives data around food insecurity of the county with graphs and maps. So you can do more interactive community needs assessment using this map and dashboard. When you want to know whether SNAP-Ed reaching low-income BIPOC population, we can use this map from Georgia. This have an equity map. They have an equity map that shows the SNAP-Ed eligible census tract with BIPOC 50% or higher. Those red areas are where low-income BIPOC population is concentrated, and blue pins are the SNAP-Ed program sites. As you can see, there are some red areas without blue pins. That means they are not covered by SNAP-Ed, and we might need to focus those areas later. And this Illinois map shows where SNAP-Ed programs are happening and where SNAP-Ed partners are located. Illinois, they have SNAP-Ed networks, which shows with the black boundaries. And then those green and yellow dots are the program sites and partners. In Minnesota, we used map for placement of new hires of SNAP-Ed educators. Those purple areas are where low-income census tracts are. Those circles are the buffers from a SNAP-Ed educator's office. When those buffers don't cover purple areas, then we try to have someone there to be hired. In 2013, this year, we are doing this analysis again to figure out which communities need a SNAP-Ed educator most.
Thanks. As you can see, there's a variety of examples of these types of maps that can be highly customizable as they're built. And as we start talking about utilizing these maps, we do want to lift up some concerns and limitations to be considered when beginning the use and creation of maps like this. Next slide, please. Here's a few limitations and concerns that we discovered as we began using these maps. Obviously not exhaustive, but equity issues are definitely a concern. GIS maps predominantly use secondary data sets, which typically insufficiently capture some racial data and overlook minoritized groups. So we want to make sure that it's important that with the use of these maps, working to pair it with localized, qualitative, cultural, and contextual data should be a best practice. Another equity consideration is also that most of these maps are English only and they're not translated into other languages. So depending on the audience of its intended use, it'd be appropriate to make that clear and or provide other translations. Data sovereignty, again, recognizing and honoring our indigenous and tribal nations. Data sovereignty, which is the right of a tribal nation to govern the collection, ownership, and application of its own data. We want to make sure that we are establishing trusting partnerships and obtaining consent when using tribal data. Creating a GIS map can be really resource intensive, especially upfront. Sometimes the cost of the software and the startup costs for the staff time required to develop these maps is high. So it may not be a realistic option for some smaller organizations and institutions. And these maps require substantial ongoing maintenance in terms of staff training and data updates. And again, in terms of language, not just translations, but also really an understanding the audience. Not all maps can be for all audiences, so it's really important to consider the audience that you are going to be using these maps with and for. Next slide, please. And as we've discussed, there are a variety of benefits to using these maps. They have an incredible ability to help us understand patterns, relationships, and geographical context, and can be a powerful tool for us doing place-based work. So the flip side, the flip of the coin of equity is it provides us a really powerful opportunity to identify gaps in programming based on race, ethnicity, and other demographics. It can allow us to really focus on local assets and resources and identify those. And it's a better way to really record keep and be accountable for the audiences that we say that we are prioritizing and what we're actually being able to do and reach. GIS maps allow for improved communications across teams and departments. They really encourage peer learning and collaboration because team members can use a common language and a common data set and visually identify this data or the data that's being displayed. It increases program efficiency. It has an incredible use in reducing duplication and ensuring adequate coverage of programming, better resource management and decision making, and all of which really helps contribute to reduced operational and logistical costs. Ultimately GIS products and softwares can provide a powerful visual framework for conceptualizing and understanding the work that we do. And they allow us to better serve our priority populations, make better, more informed decisions, better manage our resources, and help us understand cultural and community context, as well as being able to communicate our work and our efforts to a variety of audiences and partners. Next slide.
Okay. We have several examples that you can explore. So you can type in those URL, or you can also use the QR codes to navigate those. I think we can share those links later too, so you can see. You can actually go and navigate and see the usage of those maps. So that is all of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information, and I know we're just kind of scratching the surface. So really thank you for that kind of overview of this type of technology. We're now going to turn it over to Francis for a little bit more of an in-depth look at some data sets, more focusing on Pennsylvania and as they relate to PA SNAP-Ed. So we're going to zoom in a little bit. Again, if you have any questions or things you want clarification on, please put those in the Q&A. We'll have like kind of a moderated discussion after Francis's presentation. And again, this will all be recorded and available online. So please stay tuned. Francis, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I will get started. So my name is Francis Schulenberg. I serve as the Pennsylvania Nutrition Education Network undergraduate intern, and I'm very excited to talk about SNAP and MAPS. So as an introduction, I am a Temple University senior. I'll be graduating next week, which I'm really excited for. I'll be receiving a Bachelor of Science in Public Health, a minor in Applied Epidemiology, and a certificate in Geographic Information Systems. And I found my passion in GIS because I have always loved maps. When I was younger, I used to sit in the back seat of the car and navigate my family to wherever we were going with like the original Google Maps app. But because my mom wasn't particularly fond of going on the highways, I used to create my own route, which definitely took us off the beaten track. So translating that now into my work at PennN, I've been using GIS to analyze relationships between SNAP-Ed demographics, food insecurity, and social vulnerability index. And as we move forward, please put any questions or comments in the chat, and I'll get to them at the end. So a lot of my work has dealt with data transparency, which I know was touched earlier, and the acknowledgement that data that informs citizens and communities is not always available. A lot of times the data I would download would be in Excel files and shape files that was not digestible. Additionally, sometimes the data sets weren't publicly available, or you would need specific access codes. So there is a lack of cohesive information for citizens, which GIS tools allow for hopefully the exact opposite experience. So GIS has a goal of being easy to read, understandable, and being able to stand on its own, so without any other context. So this is an example of a data set that I downloaded. It's very inaccessible and hard to interpret, like what is actually going on. So GIS hopefully will provide the opposite experience. So before I get into the maps themselves, in terms of SNAP versus SNAP-Ed, I will do my best to distinguish them. Sometimes there might be some ambiguity. And then in terms of density, density is defined as the number of people per square mile or unit of land. And I will be referring to density of SNAP recipients a few times, which is the number of SNAP recipients per square mile. And to visualize this, we can imagine that the box on the left holds 4 people for 1 square mile with a density of 4 SNAP recipients per square mile. And then the box on the right holds 6 people per 4 square miles. So that yields a density of 1.5 SNAP recipients per square mile, which is significantly less dense than the box on the left. So density determines not only the number of people, but also incorporates the land that contains them. And this is important to consider because all US states are different sizes, and all Pennsylvania counties specifically have varying shapes and areas. So this first map showcases that 25 out of 67 Pennsylvania counties have a median household income that is 185% of the poverty line, or 1.85 times the federal income. And this percentage is indicative of SNAP-Ed qualification, but as a disclaimer, this map is not used to determine SNAP-Ed eligibility, but it's just taking a look at one data visualization technique for qualification criteria. And now these are some examples of legends that you will see later. So legends display the meaning of the symbols, colors, and styles used to represent geographic data on the map. So the graduated colors legend, which is on the left, has a scale of colors from the dark blue to the yellow to show quantitative differences between features. So each color represents a set range. So the blue represents 4 to 9%, the yellow represents 25 to 29%. And then there's a multivariate legend, which is a fancy term for multiple variables. And this allows for the interpretation of 2 factors at once. So the social vulnerability spans from the bottom to the top, and it's that scale of purple. And then density of SNAP recipients goes from the left to the right. So to read this, dark orange counties would be representative of the highest social vulnerability and the highest density of SNAP recipients. And then these light orange counties would be high density of SNAP recipients and low density of social vulnerability. So it's definitely confusing and very complex, but we will get into it later. And then the final key that I'm going over is the cluster analysis key, which identifies areas of statistically high and statistically low clusters of disease rates or events. So this first map utilizes graduated color key to show the percentage of people receiving SNAP benefits by Pennsylvania County. So Philadelphia County is the only yellow shaded county, and this represents that they have the highest percentage of enrolled SNAP recipients. And then counties surrounding Philadelphia are dark blue in color, which does represent a notable divide in southeastern Pennsylvania. So this next map utilizes CDC data on social vulnerability index. And a little bit on social vulnerability index is that it utilizes data regarding socioeconomic status, household characteristics, racial and ethnic minority status, and housing type and transportation. And all these factors, there are 16 in total, they're all averaged into one score or a composite value. And these scores range from 0 to 1, which you can see in the legend. So SVI scores measure the potential negative effects on communities caused by external stresses on human health, and it does speak to the overall vulnerability of each community. And this map is giving you a lot of information at once, which I definitely acknowledge. And that's why I created this next map, which is a cluster analysis, and it's using the exact same data as the previous map, but it is determining some larger takeaways so that it's not quite as confusing. So clusters of high social vulnerability index are centered in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Clinton/Center County. And this map gives a better overall view of areas in need of more outreach and resources. It's important to consider SVI when delivering programs and discovering gaps in outreach. However, there are some limitations. So first, if you take a look at the legend, there are low clusters that are supposed to be blue, but from a first glance at this map, there kind of is no blue. So that's definitely one limitation. These are those same areas zoomed in. So the light blue census tracts represent a low social vulnerability index, which is found in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And this is by census tract, which is why it's like so small. The issue with this is it's not very accurate because specifically in Philadelphia, those light blue census tracts in the southern region of Philly are low population because that's where the airport is. So nobody really lives there. So it's skewing the overall data. And then additionally, parks and airports and just areas where people aren't really living should be kind of canceled out rather than having a very low value. So additionally, it's easy to overlook areas in proximity to the red high-risk areas because they're labeled as not significant, the white census tracts, but they might still have a relatively high overall score. And just in general with maps overall, it does not give individual level data. So individuals might live in the red counties and have a low risk. People might live in the blue counties and have a high risk. So there's an acknowledgement that these maps can speak to overall trends, but not individual risks and human experiences. So this next map looks at social vulnerability index, which is the same as before, in addition to density of SNAP recipients. So this is a multivariate or multiple variables map, which allows you to look at these two factors at once. And I acknowledge that this can be a tricky legend to read, so everyone can take a little bit of time to kind of look at it. And if anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. One thing that I wanted to focus on is that dark purple counties, so that's in the legend, that's the top left. Those counties have a high social vulnerability index, but a low density of SNAP recipients. And a high social vulnerability might say that there are a large number of people living below the poverty line, which would indicate that they might have a lot of people that would qualify for SNAP, but just that aren't enrolled. So the dark purple counties, there are only 2 in the map, but these do suggest that they might be in need of more specific interventions. So this next slide shows a different way to visualize data. So I selected Philadelphia, Erie, and Allegheny County to showcase people receiving SNAP benefits per 100 people. So Philadelphia has 29 out of 100, which is the highest rate of all Pennsylvania counties. Erie County has 19 out of 100 receiving SNAP, and Allegheny County has 11 out of 100 receiving SNAP. So now I'm going to present the same data in two different formats to showcase how a small tweak can make a big visual change. So this first one showcases SNAP retailers per SNAP recipient. So for every SNAP recipient, there are 0.01 to 0.03 SNAP retailers. And this minuscule data point is really hard to figure out what's going on, at least for me it is. But what we can take away from this is that Philadelphia has the highest number of SNAP retailers per SNAP recipient, closely followed by Allegheny County. But largely what this is showing us is that it's harder to advocate for change and action without any real idea of what the data is telling us. And because we are responsible for manipulating and showcasing the data, we need to focus on outcomes that make sense to us, which is why I created this slide. And this visual gives you SNAP recipients per SNAP retailer. So Allegheny County has the lowest number of SNAP recipients per SNAP retailer, which means that only 33 people have to share the same resource, as do 40 in Philadelphia or 63 in Erie. And this speaks to differences in rural and urban communities. So even though Philadelphia has significantly more SNAP recipients than any of the other counties, they do have a higher connectivity to health resources, similar to Allegheny County, which is definitely interesting to keep in mind. In terms of some limitations that I wanted to talk about, which I know is covered in the other presentation as well, there can be pretty small tweaks to how data is grouped that can result in big visual changes. So this is the exact same data set and the exact same key, which is analyzing social vulnerability and density of SNAP recipients. However, the maps look totally different. So the one on the left showcases an equal interval, which means that data is assigned a color based on if it fits into scores 1 to 2, 2 to 3, etc. The quantile interval classifies data into categories based on the number of units per category. So they might want 10 of the color black in category A. They might want 10 of the yellow counties and 10 of the blue. So quantile has more of a range in the shaded counties, but the equal interval showcases a few at-risk counties, which is also important to keep in mind. So this just goes to show the importance of presenting data and that working with intention and transparency is crucial in ensuring health equity. Now, in terms of the scope of my work, after this webinar, you'll receive a follow-up email with a written demo and a video demo, which I will show shortly. The demo material will focus on how to search for and add a data set on ArcGIS Online. And I would love if you check them out. I spent a lot of time working on them and I'm very happy with where they come. But also my goal with these resources is that they're accessible. So if they are not, please reach out to me and I would love to hear from you. In the next 2 months, I will be creating a website to showcase my maps and data and recommendations. And then I will be at the PANN annual conference in June with a poster. So this next slide, I'll be playing an ArcGIS online demo that I created. So if you feel particularly tech inclined, you can use this as a guide to follow along as I'm going through everything. But otherwise, you will receive a follow-up email with this demo as well as a written demo to utilize at a later point. So I will get started and let me know if the video sound is not working. Demo portion. This demo will serve as an introduction to searching for and downloading GIS data on ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online is a free software that is accessible on all computers. So once the dataset is downloaded, there are options to run analysis types and create maps. However, the goal of this demo will just be to outline the introductory steps in using GIS software for the first time. And the point of this demo is to be accessible to all. So if anyone has any questions, please contact me at fschulenberg@phmc.org. So to start off, I have gone to arcgis.com and there's no need to sign in. If you want to save your maps at a later point, you can create a free account. But for the purposes of this demo, we're just going to navigate to the upper white banner and click on Map. and this will bring us to a map of the United States. And what we want to do from here is add a layer. So I'm going to go to the gray navigation banner on the left-hand side and click Add, and click Browse Layers. And now there's two options. The default is Living Atlas, which is kind of more niche. It has a few limited number of data sets from Esri. But for this demo, we're going to go to ArcGIS Online, which is basically like a cloud. So anyone can input their data sets, which is what I did exactly. So I'm going to search for PanN demo layer. And I'm going to click on this small plus sign on the bottom right portion to add it into the base map. And now this is going to come on top of the US map. So what I can look at here is a few things. So to understand what is actually being mapped and what the colors mean, I want to look at the symbology portion. And that shows me that I'm mapping the RPL themes, which is the social vulnerability index. And then additionally, if I want to click on a specific county to get more of an information, I can do that. And then finally, to navigate this map, I can either zoom in and out on my mouse pad, or I can click on this small plus and minus buttons on the bottom right portion of the map. So now to kind of play with what is actually being mapped, I'm going to navigate to the left-hand side and click on Layers. And this is the actual data set that I'm using. I'm going to click on the these little three dots, and I'm going to go to the Show Table option. And then this will pull up the data table, which gives me an idea of what is actually being mapped. And if I make this full screen, I can scroll to the right and I can see all 67 records, meaning the 67 Pennsylvania counties. And these are all of the data sets that I have available, including snap density, total number of snap. So now to change what is being mapped, I'm going to go to the right-hand side and click on Styles. And then the attributes field is what is being mapped. So I'm going to exit that out and add a new field. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and I decided to map total snap. So there are a few different options. One is the colors and amounts, which gives me like a shaded value. I could also select dot density, which gives me the total number of snap participants, and one dot is equal to 80 snap participants. So that's pretty interesting and a type of map that was not included in the PowerPoint. If I wanted to introduce a second field, I would go to Add Field, and then I could click on something like Retailers Count, and then this allows me to map two factors at once. So it's going to bring up a new set of options, and I could consider this in terms of a relationship. This allows me to look at two factors at once. So this is an introduction, and it is very much just the beginning to all the tools and tricks used on ArcGIS Online. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much. Demo portion. This demo will serve. Okay. I hope that was helpful. So just as a few takeaways in this presentation, the first is that data presentation is very necessary and critical. And GIS allows us to describe information without words or numbers, which is a very unique opportunity to help tell stories and relate to people, especially when considering all types of target audiences. The second is that GIS software is accessible, and I hope that from that presentation, there's a bit more of an understanding that the analysis tools are not totally out of reach. Next, in terms of how to appropriately use GIS data, the first is to avoid jargon, and the second is to acknowledge the complexity of what we're doing and what maps can produce. And then finally, paying attention to the fine details is really important. So different intervals can make large changes and can impact what we're actually taking away from the map. And similar to what I said in the end of that demo, this is really just the beginning, and this quick presentation designed to introduce GIS and start a conversation among everyone here. I hope this presentation was helpful and informative. This is my email if anybody has any questions or follow-up. And otherwise, I will turn it over to Camille and Eli.
Awesome, Francis. Thank you so much. And our other presenters, thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit of your expertise about maps. If anyone who is in the audience has something that they want clarified or some other question, please put that in the Q&A and we'll have kind of a moderated discussion over the course, to finish out this webinar. I guess we don't have anything yet, but my first question that came up during these presentations, we saw a number of different ways that we can, kind of manipulate data, look at data, present it. A few different use cases, like some of the community assets was really interesting, some of the demographic data. And I guess I'm wondering, what are some of kind of the main ways that administrators, maybe educators, other folks in SNAP-Ed might use these tools, might be exposed to these tools, not necessarily manipulating maps themselves, but seeing them maybe in reports. And I'm just wondering how in your guys' experience, how SNAP-Ed providers really engage with these types of technologies and resources.
There are multiple ways, but I think the most frequently used layer is the SNAP-Ed eligibility layer. So people can see where SNAP-Ed is mostly needed. And then on top of that SNAP-Ed eligibility layer, we can put our SNAP-Ed program sites layer. So we can, so that overlays whether we are serving the right population or right communities in geographical term. So I think that's one of the most frequent ways to using it. And yeah, there are so many. So yeah, I think that's a frequent one.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Well, I guess then I'm also kind of wondering, because I'm a little bit familiar with the SNAP-Ed eligibility map as well. We use that for social marketing in Pennsylvania. And I guess, could you speak to maybe how that map, some of the limitations of that map, like while it is certainly useful and steers a lot of our programming, what are some of those limitations that we can keep in mind so that we can kind of, make sure that we're at least acknowledging some of the communities that we maybe miss or don't pay enough attention to or don't put enough resources into, even though we are, trying our best to kind of adhere to the maps and the data that we are kind of guided to use.
Chantal, would you like to answer?
I think the only answer that I have, and you can add to this as well, is typically the government will put out census tract approvals. And so I would just say, look at a couple sources, and typically for SNAP education, that eligibility is predicted based on census tract. And so our administrators have verified systems through which they can look at those using a GIS map. Again, one of the limitations is there's a variety of data sets out there. So you really need to know what data set you're using. And if it's got census data, what are the years throughout which they were actually collected. So it's a little bit more technical than just looking at a map. So in terms of eligibility, there are some verified data sets that you can use to actually look at that qualification. And then I would also say just verify your sources and try to triangulate as much as you can with a couple different sources.
I would like to add to that. So those secondary data sets are their time is a little bit lagged because those nationwide data sets can be collected 2 years ago and then published in 2 years later. So there's some gap between the reality and the data. And also, as you know, the census tracts also sometimes don't have the populations that are really small populations cannot be represented on these type of national level census data. So if you are specifically prioritizing those small minority groups, then it's a little bit difficult to identify them from those national secondary data sets. So in that case, you can go to your community and collect your first-hand data.
That's a great point. And I think that kind of brings up a really kind of insightful element here that, you know, that data is only a portion of the story or of the reality, and it's just a representation of the reality. And talking to people, maybe that means collecting your own data, but talking to people is also a really important element of trying to understand maybe structural or systemic or like really big things that, you know, don't fit neatly into a you know, Excel spreadsheet or something like that. We have a question from an attendee, which goes, how effective do you find having GIS maps when dealing with policy and working towards recommendations? Maybe it's how effective, maybe how have you used them? Again, what are the limitations? Seems to be a recurring theme here. But yeah, any comment on kind of policy and recommendations using these types of tools?
I can speak a little bit to this. I don't have extensive experience actually recommending much, but just in terms of the map side of things, I think it really depends on the type of map. So maps that analyze two factors at once are better for kind of visualizing trends, but less specific. So they wouldn't allow you to say like, this county needs this, or this county has a really high rate of this. So I think maps that focus on like more clear cut, yes or no, like they do qualify or they don't qualify, or a map that shows rates of a disease or rates of qualification could be more helpful in terms of allowing specific policy recommendations.
To add to that, I think it's important to note that maps don't always communicate the story. It's really up to the people who are using the data to tell the correct story. I think using any sort of data and evidence and visualizations are incredible tools and resources to be able to share the narrative and the story, to identify what the issues are, and then provide solutions. So I think it's just important to note that it is a tool and a means to an end to share that story, but can be very powerful when you're working with policymakers on the Hill. Hanjun?
Yep, I agree all of that. And policymakers, they want numbers and they want data, and they like photos and they like this type of visualization of the data. So I think GIS can be a powerful tool to communicate with lawmakers or policymakers. So yeah, and also not only these interactive GIS maps, we can also create story maps using GIS maps. So you can attach stories into the GIS maps. So you can read through the story map, then you can, yeah, so that's another good way to visualize our data and communicate with others using stories and maps together.
Nice. And I guess I just want to plug really quick that Francis is working on a story map. Is that correct? So that will be available
Yes.
in coming weeks through our website, www.panen.org. We'll probably just have a link to it. So just want to reiterate that there will be a kind of like PA SNAP-Ed story map forthcoming. So Francis has been working really hard to kind of put that together. So thank you, Francis. And we're kind of winding down our time here, but I have kind of an outward facing question, or kind of a future looking question, which is what are some of those kind of exciting projects maybe that you guys are working on right now that is utilizing these types of tools that you are just like really excited about and you think has, you know, important implications for maybe policy, maybe programming, but SNAP-Ed going forward?
I can give you some examples that I am currently working with Minnesota Extension. So we are doing some access analysis. So when we have direct education course in certain county or census tract, and also we have some PSE program sites in a census tract, and then we compare whether this this site, this census tract has more minority population or majority population, and then compare that. And what we have found is when we have PSC programs are reaching less BIPOC population compared to the direct education. So something like that, we can see how we are engaging with our population, our communities in a different manner. So that is one example we are doing. And also we are doing it as a civil rights audit data. So that's one part of that. And then I think the USDA, FNS, they are preparing this type of map for national data. So national SNAP-Ed data. They are still developing it, but it's coming. So yeah. So you can see how SNAP-Ed is serving the nation as a whole. So you will see it maybe in 2 years, but they're still developing it.
Awesome. Thank you. And Chantal, is there anything you'd like to share? Okay, if not.
One of the things that we are working on is doing an asset map. So I think a lot of times in public health, we're trying to look at the deficits and the issues. One of the things that we're trying to focus on, along with equity and some similar things in terms of civil rights that Hyunjin is doing, we're doing a really focused effort to look at assets. And in terms of PSC work, which is policy systems and environmental changes, identifying assets within smaller regions and counties to identify potential partners who are locally already doing work that we can partner with, and really start taking more of a collective approach to the way that we are reaching our priority audiences, doing so in equitable ways and in ways that are meaningful to the community, giving the community really the opportunity to meaningfully participate and make decisions for themselves and their communities. So identifying assets will be a really huge focus for us moving forward in the coming years as we start centering equity and community based decision making for accessing nutrition security and physical activity opportunities.
Yeah, wonderful. That sounds really exciting. And we look forward to seeing where that project ends up. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for staying for this presentation. Thank you, Asna. Thank you, Francis, for all the information. Just a last minute reminder, make sure you fill out the survey, give us any feedback. Also, as Francis had mentioned, PANEN does have their conference in June. So if people are still interested in attending the conference, you can register for that online on our website. And we have some really great presentations going on then. And then as of right now, we don't have our next webinar lined up, but please make sure that you join our mail server and you'll receive information about our next training and webinar opportunities. So again, everyone, thank you so much for attending. Thank you, speakers, and have a great rest of your Monday.
Have a great day, everybody. And thank you.